Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sterling Live. My name is Caitlin Brower. I am Sterling's social media manager. We go live every Tuesday across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube at 1 p.m. Eastern. And I'm thrilled to have this group of guests with me today. I've got three people with me today. I'm so excited. I love having a panel with me every Tuesday. So today I am with Melissa Dorsett, Head of Client Success, Financial and Business Services, Matt Gay, Head of Sales, Financial and Business Services, and General Manager of Diligence. And last but not least, Steve Smith, Managing Director of our EMEA region. And today our topic is, it's a good one, so get ready. We are talking about building a global screening program with regional buy-in. So basically what we're going to be discussing today is how global financial and professional services organizations have developed global screening programs with successful buy-ins from region. So I'm thrilled about this topic, thrilled to have the three of you with me, but I do want our audience to get to know you guys a little bit better. So I'm going to have you introduce yourselves as well. So Melissa, can you go ahead and get us started?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Dorsett. I am the head of client success for Sterling's Financial and Business Services division. So I run a team that is responsible for managing the relationships with all of our largest financial and business services clients. And that client base is comprised of a lot of global organizations that run very global background screening programs with us. So I've been with Sterling a little over 6.5 years and excited to share some of the experiences that I've had in this arena.
Thank you and welcome. Matt, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Of course. Thank you. And good afternoon, good evening. Coming to you live from the basement in North Jersey. I am Matthew Gay, head of financial services sales, as well as GM of our diligence business. I am the resident graybeard on the call today. I've been with Sterling nearly 18 years. So I bring a bit of experience running enterprise sales, small and mid-market sales, our partner and alliance team. And I've seen quite a bit of change in the industry over these nearly 18 years. So looking forward to today's conversation.
Residential gray beard. I love that introduction. I think it's great. And moving over to Steve, it's a little bit dark where you are. So can you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name's Steve Smith. I'm the Managing Director for Sterling, based out of EMEA. I'm sat in the UK. So good evening to anybody in time zone with me. So my role is to lead the Sterling business teams for the region. So ultimately, I work with customers who run programs with us in the UK, across Europe, the Middle East, and some of those programs are tied to the region, and many of them are global in nature as well. So that means I collaborate with these great people on the screen, and many others like them, just to make sure that they're globally successful too.
That's great. And again, welcome to all three of you. Thank you for joining me today. Those who are joining us live right now and watching across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, you can ask our panelists questions at any time during the discussion today. Just go ahead in the comment box across Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube and go ahead and ask your questions. And I will field them to each of our panelists as I see fit throughout the show. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to start our topic, our discussion today around the evolution of global programs. So Matt, I'm going to kick it to you first with this question. So can you share how you've seen global programs evolve over the years?
Absolutely. I think as we look at background screening, just in general, the industry in and of itself has predominantly been driven by the US market. Sterling as an organization has been around since 1975, but seeing the background screening industry in the space, it's similar to where it is today, has really been since like the early 90s. Your traditional criminal background checks, employment, education, drug testing, credit, etc. It wasn't until like the early aughts that we started to see adoption from our clients across the globe for their background screening programs. And I think, as would be expected in those early years, often our programs were very U.S.-centric and driven by the U.S. headquarters. So they would grant an edict. They would say, we'd like to see our programs adopted across the globe. And then each of those relative geographies were left scrambling to figure out how best to accommodate and or meet the already pre-configured US programs. So, that is going back early 04, 05, 06. I would say the pendulum began to swing in the coming years. In the last 5 or 6 years, it swung very much toward a geographic-centric model, whereby different geographies would then take ownership of their programs, really start to dictate terms of engagement, dictate the type of programs that were most appropriate for them to run. And today, I think we're kind of, we're finding the pendulum kind of settling at a happy medium where there is no true, one size fits all, and there is a little bit of, pulling from best of both worlds, using the very specific requirements or meeting the very specific requirements in the U.S. while still accommodating many of those global either cultural requirements and or those geo-specific legal requirements. So I think there's been quite a few changes, and I'm pleased to be here with Melissa and Steve, because I think they can speak about how we've been really effective in deploying a nice marriage of those models, as of late.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for that. It's an interesting evolution for sure, and something that's, cool to look into and understand, how a lot of organizations have adapted and evolved, over the past couple of years. And even just looking at it, maybe people are thinking we're talking about like many, many years right now, but we're actually looking at a bit of a shorter span of time. So definitely interesting. So when we think about that evolution, we're also thinking about, how to build out these global programs. So that's where I want to shift to next. Melissa, and I'm going to come your way. So how would you best describe the approach to a global background screening today?
So there is definitely, as Matt mentioned, it's not a one size fits all sort of view that we're taking here. And global background screening can mean different things for different organizations. And so in the world that we're living in, obviously, the world is shrinking, and candidates are diverse in their history and where they've lived. So they're certainly thinking about hiring global candidates. And then there's companies that are hiring globally because they've got different offices around the world. And typically, when we talk about global programs, it's a combination of both of those components. And so when we're talking about current state and what global screening means today, as Matt mentioned, we're kind of settling back in this place where regions around the world had reacted to being forced into this U.S. model.
Right.
And they kind of pushed against that and said, we don't fit in that model. We want to do our own thing. We know our own country. We know our own requirements. Just sort of let us be. And now I think we're seeing a little more of settling back into this like happy medium where organizations are saying, let's see if we can find a global vendor. Let's see if we can take and implement a global strategy and then really execute that at the regional level. And where we've seen the most success is where clients have in that central planning and that sort of global strategic planning, they've incorporated members of their regional teams. So there's representation at the regional level. Similarly, when they're partnering with Sterling or whomever their background screening provider may be, there's representation at the regional level on our side as well, so that we can make sure that we're marrying those local requirements with the global strategy. And we're kind of all moving in the same direction and making sure that we're meeting these goals that we're setting at the global level, but not foregoing any regional nuances.
Right. And it definitely does set up these organizations for success and gives them that advantage, because you're right, it's not one size fits all. So it's really important to look at it into the view that you just described there. So thank you for that. Steve, given that you are the managing director of the EMEA region, you do have, that global focus and, looking into it. So I wonder, how do you see the programs play out around the world?
Yeah, so I would say it's a really exciting place to be at the moment. With this pendulum swinging back into kind of collaboration mode between regions, I'd say that this is a really exciting part of the world to be in and see these programs come together. Just kind of going back to Matt and Melissa's points around the kind of the relationships previously, when the pendulum was kind of back a little while ago. I would say that kind of as Sterling, as a regional entity at that time, it was quite good for us too, because we had a lot of clients that joined us for a regional program when their global programs with other providers had failed. And generally they failed because there was this pushback against the mandate. And so what we were finding was, as client stakeholders in our region were pushing back against being told what to do, we were being able to work with them regionally to come up with fantastic regional programs. So what was a global failure in one location led to regional success. I think as we've seen the pendulum swing, what's really exciting is to see there isn't that kind of pull away anymore. There's this pull together. And so I think that breakaway and the global failure of the past has meant that client stakeholders in regions all around the world now have a seat at the table and a voice that's listened to, because it was part of the reason why these things didn't work before. And so the client teams are pulling together, they're collaborating, there's much clearer ownership for the regional elements within a global program. I think it's really exciting to see it happen.
Are you seeing any like key differentiators, across these different programs around the world?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the differentiators are tied to kind of regional nuances, and a lot of that ties to what you can and can't do in certain countries. The governance frameworks around that, particularly in my region, it's around data protection. The GDPR has kind of changed the way that a lot of customers build their programs. And it's made it almost more different to the US kind of vision of how things work there. And so there's almost a bigger gap now that client stakeholders need to pull together on in order to close it. But I'd say some of the key drivers, regardless of those differences, the key drivers are consistent experiences. It's about consistent client experience. They want to be able to look at data in the same kind of way. They want to be able to have the same governance structures around how they make decisions, have the same terminology across their teams globally, so that when they talk about an outcome of a background check, everyone's speaking the same language wherever they are. And similarly for candidates as well, like there are differences in how we collect data from candidates, but having a consistent interface for that is really important, and an interface that's flexible enough to cater for the nuances as well. So it's less about the data points you collect, it's more about how you ask for that data, and the experience that that individual has in providing it. I'd say some of those are some of the key differentiators.
Yeah, no, that's great for sure. So to wrap up, the overarching topic of building out a program, I do have one final question, and it's both for you, Steve, and Melissa. So I wonder, so what are some examples of different client experiences and approaches that Sterling brings to the table here? So Melissa, you can go ahead and get us started with this question.
Yeah, sure. So there's one client program that really comes to mind, and we have grown together over the years and in expanding their global program and reach. And I think they've taken a great approach because they really did sort of start at a very focused levels. They picked a few key countries where they wanted to have this global consistency and this center of excellence, sort of like a centralized group that was going to essentially oversee the background screening program. But they did it with that regional lens. So within that center of excellence team, they had representation from the UK and from their Pacific region and from Canada and the US. And from there, they really said, okay, what do we need in each region? What are we trying to accomplish globally, right? And then what do we need in each of these regions to make sure that we're meeting our local requirements, and to really have like a key focus on that candidate experience and the user experience. Like, are we making sure that we're optimizing the process for each candidate as they're coming at it sort of from a different angle? And so once they got that key program in place and they really focused on those couple of countries, and listen, it took some work. We fine-tuned over the years. They, as we kind of talk about this evolution, their approach evolved as well. We started out really doing very different things across all the regions, and then we kind of brought it back together and decided where there needed to be nuanced differences. And so Once they got the program operating and we really, had things running smoothly for those key countries, they've now started to add to the group. So they're bringing new countries into the fold and saying, all right, what worked when we implemented the UK? Now let's take that similar approach for Singapore or for the Philippines or for India. And so we've seen it continue to grow, and doing it in sort of like a phased rollout, I think has really helped it be manageable and then also successful, because you're not trying to understand all, or they're not trying to say, all right, we're going to take every single program that has used, different vendors or had different approaches and tear it all down at the same time and build it back in one way. It's more been, okay, we have this proven model that's worked really well in our top hiring countries. Now let's see how we can take a similar approach and make it manageable, and also, ease the regions into it. Again, you don't want to have that pushback where folks are feeling like they're getting forced square peg round hole into something that doesn't work for them. So I think that that's just a really great example that we've seen be successful.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure. It's definitely a great example. So, Steve, any client experiences, approaches from Sterling that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, I'd just kind of chime in on that same example that Melissa's given, because my team have kind of collaborated, especially in the last couple of years, where the UK market has become more significant for the client. It's been about, okay, what can we do to leverage our regional expertise and build it into their global program? And that's as simple as giving them people on the ground that are subject matter experts regionally that can speak into the program. And what's great is the client relationships have developed to the extent that there's more trust, I think. They feel more free to collaborate with us as a partner in the regions. And also about the product energy that's happening in region, kind of making its way through to these customers who have this global vision as well. There are other customers that we're working with who are HQ'd in EMEA, rolling out global. And to be honest, the ones that work really well work in that same way that Melissa's talked about. Sometimes the markets they choose to go to first are determined by the ones that they have the highest impact, maybe in terms of the types of hires they have, the demographic. Sometimes it's just based on sheer volume and where they have their service centers and things like that. We're working with one client now who are bringing in a whole heap of sites in Asia in the first wave of their rollout. And so it's just about taking the time to listen and understand together where the priorities are and just really partner with them. And I think people are key to that.
Yeah, no, I just love the point of, taking the time and really understanding, what they need and just truly acting as a partner. So I do love that takeaway right there. So we just had a great discussion, part of this around building a program, but it's important for us to bring up now that organizations need to build out these programs slowly. And I thought it's a good segue here because Steve, you did bring up a partnership. So Matt, I'm going to throw a question your way. So does Sterling have a standard approach to, the way in which, we implement across like our clients for this?
I would say yes and no. So of course I'm going to play both sides of it. One of Sterling's core philosophies and tenets, principles is that the client's always in the room. And very much so, as we orchestrate an implementation of a program, we're taking a client first point of view. So much to my point earlier today, there is no like one size fits all. There is no, edict on how we should deploy or what we determine the box you have to fit in. So it's very much a consultative approach with our clients, with our organizations. I would say Steve highlighted a point earlier, which I think should be highlighted. It's simply that it's not always these days being driven right from the U.S. Oftentimes we'll see programs, particularly in the financial services space, that are getting driven out of the U.K., out of EMEA, out of APAC. And they're the ones that are kind of pulling the cart along and making sure that everybody's coming together to drive that global program. So I think ultimately, while yes, we still put on our consultative hat, we still furnish best practice, we still talk through what experiences have worked well for our clients in the past. At the end of the day, that program configuration, that development, that deployment is very much driven by that organization's culture, by that organization's goals and objectives, by what they have deemed as the most important aspects of that program for them. And that could be something, as little as, like, to Steve's point, making sure that everybody has the exact same experience from an applicant point of view, right? Maybe the questions we ask are different, maybe the products we search are different, but at the end of the day, they're all going through a similar experience. They're getting welcomed on board. That's me. They're getting welcomed on board in the same manner if they're in the UK, if they're in the US, if they're in Brazil, if they're in South Africa, that across the board, they're still getting a very similar experience. And, one point that I've always kind of harped on over the years is that, the background screening piece, while a very small part of the onboarding experience, it ends up being such an overly impactful part of the experience for an applicant, because that's their first real interaction with the company as a presumed employee. So that's where oftentimes you look for companies to really make a huge impact and say, okay, what's their first experience with us going to be? And that's why, again, not to belabor the point, but that's why we consult with our clients to identify what's going to be most important to them.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I did, like how in the beginning you did segue into something that Steve had mentioned before. So I actually now have a question for Steve in regards to your response there, Matt. Thank you. So Steve, how can organizations support clients regionally while also connecting to each region?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think where I've seen this happen best, and it happens at every stage, right? So let's start with the process that a client goes through to select a vendor, right? More and more these days, we're seeing RFP processes include things like regional workshops. So I've been involved in a 2-day RFP discovery session where there were basically 4 hours dedicated in 4 regional groups. And so the client pulled together different client stakeholders in each region, and they had regional conversations. So it was a truly global sales and RFP process. And that never used to happen. I mean, Matt will know that it used to be decided in a room somewhere, and maybe there were a few people on the phone. But those connecting our people with the client people regionally is really important at every stage. That happens at implementation as well. So where we assign a global project manager, that project manager coordinates implementation workshops that involve regional resources as well. The way that when a client goes live and the client success team that supports them matches up people with people, teams with teams. And so we make sure that there's a lead on everything. There's a lead on the implementation. There's a lead in client success. But around those individuals, there are regional teams to support the regional teams on the client side as well. So again, it's all about people. It's another one of Sterling's values, but it genuinely is. And I think when you're trying to connect these global programs together, you have to make sure people are aligned.
No, I truly do love that. And I think that's great. So Melissa, I know you did provide some examples before in regards to experiences and approaches that Sterling takes. But I think our audience really likes prime examples. So I'm going to come back to you for another example here. So can you share an example of a client that has successfully implemented a global program?
Yeah, I spoke to a specific client earlier, and one of the things that I just wanted to sort of build off of that is while the initial implementation is of course important, and everything that Matt and Steve have already shared is key to that, you have to have engagement at the regional level. It's about listening and understanding the business goals and understanding the regulatory and compliance requirements. But I think another key point, and something that we've seen some clients do recently, is that it's also, we always talk about this, a background program is kind of a living, breathing thing, and it needs to be able to change over time. And because we've seen the global screening market evolve so much over the past, 5 years, definitely the past 10, 15, 20 years, but even in the past 5, we've seen such a huge change. We're kind of at the point with a lot of clients now, and there's one in particular that I'm thinking of that I think Matt actually sold back in the day, that's almost going through a reassessment of their global program and saying, what can we do differently now that we have learned so much about the opportunities out there to really streamline screening, that maybe we can make some different decisions, have maybe our legal teams re-review what our requirements are in different countries. So I think that that's an important point to just consider, is that it's important to be open to ongoing change, because this is a very fluid market. And I mean, you know, at Sterling, we're constantly adding products and services on a regular basis to our product library because there's new sources that are available or there's a change in legislation. And so, yes, there are going to be those one-off changes, but I think right now we're also seeing this approach to kind of digging into the details that were maybe set up 5-10 years ago and saying maybe we should rethink things, and being open to those learnings that we've had with other clients and that we can sort of bring to the table and advise on. So maybe not an initial implementation that I'm referencing, but almost like sort of a reinvigoration or a reconsideration or scoping of the program.
Can't believe you dare touch one of my clients.
We take good care of them.
Put a perfect program in place 10 years ago.
Yeah.
No, that's great for sure. And we've been talking a lot today about, you know, how things have evolved. So I want to move into, you know, the idea around, you know, center of excellence and talking about structures and the evolution there. So Melissa, I want to start with you when we talk about this. So can you share a little bit about how you've seen these center of excellence structures evolve over time?
Yes, definitely. So in a very similar way that we've seen sort of the whole global program evolve, the same has happened with these centers of excellence. And, you know, we've talked about, like, I can't stress enough, and I know that Steve and Matt agree, the importance of having representation from each of the regions in this central group. So whether that's in the US or in the UK or, you know, wherever the headquarters are and wherever the program's ultimately being run out of, making sure that there is that representation. That's been huge. And I think that's been a change just in the past couple of years on the client side. And similarly, we've, you know, mirrored that on our side. And I think, you know, Steve spoke to this. It's really important that our support structure and partnership mirrors the client structure so that we have those counterparts for everyone that's involved in the program. And I actually, you know, sort of think back over the last couple of years and the way that Steve's team and my team has partnered together to support these accounts and kind of work through how they're run and partner with the Centers of Excellence teams. Like, we've, you know, gone to meetings together in London to see a very long time client and kind of run through, here's what we're seeing change in the UK market specifically. Here's how that sort of fits into the bigger picture of your program. And it's making sure that we're aligned every step of the way as the program's evolving. And that doesn't mean, like, you know, I'm in every conversation or Steve's in every conversation, but it means that we understand what the ultimate goals are. And that's guiding the decisions that we're making at the regional level. And so that, on the client side, we've seen that as well through these center of excellence kind of structures and the fact that they've become more regionalized.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think you bring up the good point too of, you know, supporting our clients regionally. So Steve and Matt, you know, feel free to chime in here in regards to organizations, you know, supporting these clients regionally, but also connecting, you know, with each region too. So do you guys have anything to add there?
I think the only thing I'd add is, I think you can see, like, I think Melissa will agree as well. Like, you know when a client is going to partner really well when it comes to this, right? You get a sense early on, okay, this is going to be hard work because the teams feel like they're a bit separate. So the ones that work really well, the centers of excellence that are led really well, are those where there's some agreement in advance about what they're trying to achieve together. And I think where we talked about that pendulum swing earlier, I think this is where it's really evident now. All the global programs I'm engaged in, whether it be during the sales cycle or this kind of revitalization that Melissa was just talking about, the ones that really excite me are the ones where the client team are totally together, because that never used to be the way. Like, there have been presentations where maybe the presentation was happening in New York, or maybe it was happening in Singapore, and me or one of my team were in with the client in London, and And the feeling in the room was they checked out. They had a separate conversation because they just weren't together on it. And so I think that's what's really important here. And what's really good is it's a pattern that's really starting to kind of repeat itself, is that client teams have obviously sorted out where they want to be going together before they engage the partner on it as well. So I think seeing that drives collaboration. There's always this push-pull. There's always going to be, because they don't understand each other's jurisdictions in enough detail, right? But that's where trust comes in. I think we're starting to see that trust evolve, which allows regional stakeholders to really do a great job of working together with the centers of excellence to drive successful programs.
I mean, I have nothing really to add on top of that. I would simply say that this is certainly not Sterling's grand idea to move in this manner. We're adapting and adjusting and growing with the space. And to Steve's point, certainly, understanding and hearing the value, the nuance, and that's brought by these very specific jurisdictional or regional needs. There's no longer where you'll just totally forget. I'll be candid. I probably was on a couple of those calls where we just forgot about Steve and the folks over in the UK as we pitched our meeting in person. Today, I don't know if it's Zoom, I don't know if it's any of these other technologies, but you're certainly finding that the collaboration, the involvement, the buy-in across the board is significantly higher than it had been in the past. And again, this is looking at this over 15 plus years, 16, 17 years of driving these types of programs. I like to see where it's going, because I know it certainly puts Melissa, her team, and our global teams in a better position to support once they know they don't have to fight the implementation process.
Yeah, no, that's great for sure, from all three of you. So thank you. So I'm seeing a couple of things across social media here. I'm going to kind of combine some questions, comments that I'm seeing, and want to just get your guys' opinion on given the situation right now, like as we are going through this pandemic globally, have there been any changes, any adaptations you've seen, evolutions, as we're talking about global streaming evolving over the years? What about in the past year in general, just in regards to global screening? So I'm going to punt this question to the three of you. I'd love to get all of your insight on it. But yeah, so it's just basically the topic that we're dealing with right now, just in, regards to, COVID-19 and things like that.
Yeah, I'm happy to start if you want, guys. Yeah. So just in terms of so one of the things that I've been super impressed by, and especially at Sterling here, is that we have this collaboration for global, but we also have really distinct, strong teams in each region, right? So when you've got the pandemic that is hitting every country around the world, coordinating a response that helps customers get what they need, it requires really strong teams, right? Because you can't take a global view in that kind of granular detail and be helpful to customers in terms of giving advice and getting new customers started quickly. We have seen customers come to Sterling urgently, both in the US and internationally, because they can't get service from a provider and they need to keep mobilizing their workforce. So I think in terms of how we've seen things be different, is it's actually forced us internally at Sterling to lean on each other more, because we need to know what's happening with education checks in Pakistan. We need to know what's happening with the criminal record checks in the UK. And it's not just clients in those specific jurisdictions that need to know that, it's clients everywhere. And so having the ability to pull together and share those updates in a way that's really helpful is great. And that's what's mobilized us to deliver over 99% of global checks throughout the pandemic. And that's why customers have joined as well, because we've made it easy for them. And I know it's the same in the US, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think having the regional teams has helped us execute. I mean, there are certain products and services that were impacted more than others. I mean, any products where, or any sort of background check component that requires you to meet in person with an individual, well, that's obviously been nearly impossible through COVID, or at least for parts of COVID, right? So how have we worked with the local sort of sources to influence what their requirements are? How have we then communicated those changing requirements back to clients? That's been really key. And I think the partnership that I saw between my team and Steve's team in communicating like current state back to clients as it evolved, because it was like very much changing almost on a daily basis, like specifically thinking about, you know, the UK CRIM requirements. There were certain searches that there had to be a big shift with. And so being able to make sure that we shared with our clients on a regular basis what the status was and how we were handling it, I was just really impressed with the ability to do that. And I think that was key. You know, no matter what country we're talking about, through the past 6 months or however long it's been, 10 months, having transparency and open lines of communication has been the most important factor in continuing to support these clients. Obviously delivering the services that we are, but in terms of supporting clients and the partnerships and the relationship, I think that's been key.
Matt, do you have anything to add there?
I don't.
No?
They did a nice job.
Okay. No, it's perfect. So let's talk a little bit more about, you know, having a regional footprint and support. So Steve, can you explain how this looks at both the tactical and strategical level?
Yeah, sure. I was actually going to touch on the pandemic in this answer as well. I was thinking this is
I beat you to it.
You beat me. I know, totally. But I think it's really easy for companies to talk about themselves as global and to talk about their footprint, right? How many times have I been sat in a room and put a slide up that has brick and mortar locations, right? Lots of organizations do that. We used to talk about where our buildings were. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. We talk about where our people are, where our expertise is, where our knowledge is. And one of the things we pride ourselves on is our deep market expertise. And I think that's what's really important when we're thinking about our footprint. And it plays back into the answer we were just giving, right? So knowing the nuances of the Middle East market and the expat communities moving into those markets and the requirements on those individuals to have their licenses validated, but it be done in writing in line with Sharia law, like those things, knowing that level of detail is critical when you're trying to navigate something like the pandemic, but also just day to day and being able to mobilize solutions that fit for a market.
Right.
Otherwise, what you end up with is the kind of one size fits all product that you wedge into the different markets. And so when I think about footprint and how we're set up to deliver that, it is all about people. And it's about having, it's not about putting one person in one office in one country to say you have presence there. It's about having a full regional team. So for me, that's about a fully engaged, energized, empowered product team for UK, for Europe, for Middle East, that can be looking at everything that's going on and building out best practices and continuous improvement in the product portfolio. It's about legal and compliance teams in each market jurisdiction that can keep an eye on what we're obligated to do and the best practice advice we can be giving. It's about marketing teams that provide thought leadership in each market. It's the operations and fulfillment teams. Like a great example of that, we had our client advisory board meeting in EMEA just over a year ago. This year, we actually spent a lot of time talking about globally connected programs. So it's really interesting having this conversation today because it's timely. But the previous year, we were talking a lot about what are the limiting factors for clients that are trying to grow a regional program into a global one. And we talked so much about language. And as a result of that conversation, we were able to stand back and say, right, our customers really need us to be working better with them in local language. And so we took our fulfillment organization, our operations team for the region, and we thought, how is this broken down? And we actually created a new team. And we've done that this year through the pandemic, which specializes in languages. Languages in the fulfillment. So we're approaching in local language for verifications, languages in support as well. And it's been a phenomenal success. And I think when we think about the footprint, it's things like that that really make the difference. It's about understanding the market needs and tailoring the solution to fit it. And having broad teams in each jurisdiction, not kind of skinny ones that just kind of tick a box to say we have a presence there, but empowered, strong teams. I think it's all about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end that on too. So like that strong presence across. So I do like that for sure. So Melissa, how have you seen this, work and make a difference for your clients specifically?
So just to hit on the point or the team that Steve was referencing, this language team, my largest global client, it's a large financial firm that has had a global program. They probably implemented a global program before that was really a trend or a norm. So they've certainly over time expanded and changed, and we've grown along with them over the past 10 years. They have benefited enormously from the language center that we've created in this team, because they have candidates from all over the world. They are hiring in many different countries, and we had challenges over the years whenever we had documents come in that were in different languages, because we were leveraging a partner to do translation, and we just didn't have ownership of that directly for all these various languages, and now we do, and we've seen it be hugely impactful for them from a fulfillment standpoint. So we're able to get the documents translated and action it very quickly, but also from a support perspective. So those candidates have someone that they can call in and speak with in their local language. So it's just a comfort and familiarity factor. And, it goes back to the point of consistent experiences. And I think that has really been the biggest impact, is that probably 5 years ago, it was a little more acceptable to just sort of tell certain candidates, well, you maybe asked a couple questions that are US centric and it's not relevant, just ignore it. And that's certainly not the case anymore, because it's just, we've grown and changed, and we've developed technologies that are more dynamic and more responsive to a candidate's particular history. And that has been huge. And that's been, that change on our side has been driven by our client feedback and by these regional programs that we've learned so much from, that we've now applied at the global level. So I think that's where we've seen it, the candidate experience for sure. And then also just our ability to execute based on these, the feedback that we've gotten from clients, and to actually be able to fulfill internally with these specialties.
Yeah, no, definitely a good and timely example for sure. So I do appreciate you sharing that. So I want to round out our conversation today, with just one final topic. And Steve, I'm going to come over to you, because I've had the privilege over the past, it's probably like 14 weeks now, to sit down with, Sterling's experts week after week on these episodes. We talk a lot about our industry expertise, our compliance expertise, these areas where Sterling really thrives as an organization and really helps other organizations by partnering with them on this. So I'd love to understand how Sterling is leveraging our regional expertise, so that other layer right there. So can you give us just some final thoughts today on that? Yeah,
sure. I mean, I think in many ways, the answer is as simple as the answers you will have heard over the last 14 weeks, right? Because depending on the conversation you're in, that experience is as valid. I think the challenge we have is connecting it, right? So all the expertise and the things we pride ourselves on, when we have conversations around a vertical or a product in the US, it all exists in the equivalent product or location in the regions around the world. That's really what our big strength is that we're not kind of leading out of a single center of excellence, but we have these multiple locations where our business is growing and thriving and adapting. And so all of that kind of deep market expertise is truly developed regionally. And that works really well for customers who work with us regionally. I think we've adapted well, and I think our clients are really adapting well to what it means to connect customers globally with that expertise in regions. Maybe we have not been so good at that in the past, but I think today we're better than we've ever been. And I think because clients' appetite for that is much more now as well, it's becoming easier to build these programs because I'm not trying to drag Melissa and team into a conversation in EMEA without the client equivalent from the US being involved. Everyone's in it together now.
Right.
That's what's really exciting about it.
Yeah, no, and that's great to hear for sure. And I know our audience definitely appreciates that as well. So such an amazing conversation with the three of you today. So I do want to remind our audience right now across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, if you do have any final questions for our panelists, please send them in now. And while we wait for any new questions coming in, I'm going to get some final thoughts from the three of you. So Matt, can you start us off with your final thoughts on today's discussion?
Yeah, certainly. I would simply say that to wrap this up, while we've evolved to a point where we feel like it's starting to settle, I think the expectation is that it will continue to change as time evolves. To Steve's point just earlier, while there's deep market expertise and they've been siloed for many, many years, now bringing that consolidation across the globe, it's certainly a value add for organizations, regardless of industry. And I think revisiting your programs rather consistently is an important part of staying abreast of those changes, of those available enhancements, of those new technologies that can be leveraged to really have positive impacts on your business and on your people.
No, that's great. Melissa, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, so I may be a little biased since I'm in the client success realm, but I really think that the most important component to building and maintaining a successful global program, or really any program, is creating a strong partnership and building trust with the team that you're working with on our side and your internal teams. And so as much as you can open up the lines of communication and be very forthcoming about what your goals are, where the challenges lie, and really what you're hoping to accomplish together, and inviting all of those different stakeholders into that conversation and into the sort of solutioning and building. I think that's the most important part of having a truly successful program, and then just being open to change along the way, because it's going to continue to change. And we've certainly through 2020 have seen so many unexpected challenges come up, and we worked through it really collaboratively and as seamlessly as I think we could have hoped for. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have strong partnerships with our clients, and then with our internal partners at Sterling that support the products and services that we offer. So I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, no, it's great. And being open to change, super important, especially right now. Steve, what are your final thoughts on today's discussion?
Yeah, I think just reflecting back on all that we've talked about, I just think the most important thing for any potential client listening in today, wanting to really build a successful global screening program, is just to take the time to listen to the people you've got around you all over the place. And that I think where we've seen these programs be really successful is where that listening is active. It's really intentional. It drives collaboration. I think that's the biggest difference we've seen on this pendulum swing. It's not that regions are included in the decision-making process for political reasons internally. It's because actually they bring real value to the conversation. So just time to listen.
No, that's great. And such a great way to wrap up this conversation. I am truly honored to have sat down with the three of you today. It was truly, such a great topic to go over. We talked a lot about our client experiences, a lot about what Sterling does, provided a lot of great examples in regards to global screening programs, and helping, region by region, things like that. So thank you to the three of you for providing all of your insight, all of your expertise today. I know I learned a lot. I know our audience is definitely going to be taking a lot away here. So thank you for joining me. Thank you to our audience too, across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube for joining us. We are here every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, going live with many faces across Sterling. So again, thank you to our audience and thank you to our panelists today. And we will catch you guys next week. So thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.